Hi, Dave Sewell here. Hey, just want to talk for a couple of minutes about a case that's come up in the employment court last week here in Canterbury. And it concerns a medical officer of health and his 20-year employment with a local district health board. Now, this medical officer of health was dismissed from his role in October last year. And he's gone to the court because the person within that role is looking for an interim reinstatement back to his job whilst there's a full hearing taking place around his unfair dismissal claim. During the court case, there had been a pile of affidavits presented from 14 colleagues, all complaining about this medical officer's behaviour, and all of them stating that they didn't want to work with him again in the future. And there was a range of complaints going from from this medical officer's lack of insight into his own manner and how it impacted the people around him. His line managers were reporting that he was impossible to manage. His relationship with other staff and external parties was dysfunctional at best. And some colleagues had felt harassed and bullied by this particular individual. And it was reported during the court case by his line manager, clinical director, that clinical director was continually undermined by this medical officer. And humiliating emails had been sent, and it was in his opinion that this medical officer just was not a team player. And as a result of that, as a result of what had gone on between the two of them, that clinical director had actually resigned from his role, mostly due to his inability to be able to manage this medical officer. So what saddens me most about this case is that none of this needed to happen. Had there been a semblance of psychological safety within this organisation, then the medical officer of health would have been challenged about his behaviour in a supportive way that would have figured out why he was behaving the way he did. Because let's face it, with the list of complaints that was presented in the court case, none of that behaviour was coming from someone who was happy. So where around that medical officer's work or general life was there was stress levels so high that he wasn't his best self. And if there had been psychological safety within the organisation, the clinical director would have been given the support and been given the skills and the knowledge for him to be able to interact with the medical officer and indeed work through any of the stresses that the medical officer had that was causing him to behave the way he did, and would have likely come to a far more equitable solution for the two of them much earlier in the piece, and certainly not 20 years later. But the question needs to be asked, was the fear of complaining about the medical officer's behaviour to a line manager greater than the fear coming from the victims of the medical officer? Was there a complete absence of psychological safety in the organisation that created an environment of mistrust and just a resignation that actually, people like this medical officer are just allowed to behave in this way? And why did it take 20 years to deal with this situation? Whether or not the medical officer gets temporarily reinstated or not, there is a bigger issue at play here. It is clear that psychological safety is absent within this organisation. And that's no slight to the leadership team, because it's likely that leadership team just have not been taught about psychological safety. Because let's face it, leadership programs, the vast majority of them for decades now, are operational leadership. It's about operational leadership, how to delegate, how to communicate, how to prioritise, that sort of stuff. It's not about how do you have a difficult conversation with someone who is behaving awful or how do you deal with a complaint about someone who's bullying? Well, that stuff never comes up on leadership courses. But this is what psychological safety is all about. And if we can get psychological safety within an organisation, then you equip your leaders to have those challenging and supportive conversations long before any incident ever gets to the performance conversation. And when that happens, there's the trust within a team grows, the team works closer together, they're far more supportive of each other during tough times, and actually they just get more stuff done. Hey, so that's me. I've had my say about this particular case. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you again in the next video. Thank you.